Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into something really interesting. Deception.
Really interesting.
We're looking at The Folly of Fools by Robert Trivers. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah.
In it, he talks about how deception, it's not just like a human flaw we all deal with sometimes.
Right.
It's like a fundamental part of life itself, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah. One of the most shocking things he points out is how bad we are at recognizing deception.
Okay, yeah.
Especially like when we're deceiving ourselves.
Yeah, so let's unpack that a little bit because the book talks about how, in a way, our brains can sometimes work against us when it comes to kind of seeing the truth.
Right.
It's almost like we're wired to overlook it sometimes. But why would that be?
Well, Trivers' suggestion, and I think this is really interesting, is that in many cases, self-deception actually evolved as a tool to better deceive others. So if you can convince yourself of something, even if it's not entirely true, you're more likely to kind of project that air of confidence and possibly even fool those around you.
Oh, that's so interesting because it's almost like playing poker, right? Like You're trying to have a poker face, you're trying to bluff your way through it.
Yeah.
And he even calls recognizing deception a moving target because it's always, evolving.
Right.
But then hold on, because if we're all hardwired to deceive and be deceived, how does anybody come out on top?
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting. So Trivers argues that intelligence plays a crucial role on both sides of this deception equation.
Okay.
So those who are adept at deception tend to be intelligent, but so are those who are good at detecting deception.
Oh, interesting.
So it really is this fascinating sort of evolutionary arms race.
That's so interesting. So it's like, I don't know, when you see those nature documentaries and the predator camouflages itself to blend in and ambush its prey, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's a form of deception.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's clearly advantageous.
Yeah, and a perfect example he gives in the book is the cuckoo bird.
Oh, right.
These birds trick other species into raising their young.
Oh, wow.
And their chicks are often comically large compared to the host bird's actual offspring.
Wait, so the host birds don't notice that they're raising this giant imposter chick?
It seems obvious to us, right?
Yeah.
But he says that these birds are hardwired to not see this as a discrepancy.
Wow.
It's a clear example of how evolution can favor even seemingly illogical forms of deception if it provides a survival or reproductive advantage.
So it's like deception is very deeply ingrained in nature itself.
Yeah.
But how does this play out in our everyday human lives?
Right.
It's not like we're,
We're not laying our eggs.
laying our eggs in other people's nests, right?
Right, not typically, no. But Trivers argues that we engage in subtler forms of self-deception all the time.
Okay.
And these deceptions influence everything from our personal relationships to our political views even.
Like what? Give me an example.
So think about how we explain our own actions.
Okay.
Especially when we've done something wrong, right? He calls these our false internal narratives.
Okay, see, now I feel like I do that all the time, where it's like that little voice in your head. It's like, well, everyone does it, or
Exactly. It's like your internal PR team working overtime.
Exactly, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
And sometimes these narratives get so elaborate that we convince ourselves that they're true, even when, evidence might suggest otherwise.
Oh, wow. This is starting to sound a little unsettling. So, are we all just walking around with these, made-up narratives about ourselves? And we're just blind to our own self-deception?
Yeah.
How can we even tell what's real anymore?
That's where awareness comes in. But before we dive into that, let's explore some more examples of how this plays out, both on a personal level and a societal one.
Okay, all right, I'm ready. Hit me.
Yeah.
What other, crazy examples does Travers talk about in the book? So you're saying that we don't even know when we're deceiving ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we're totally oblivious to it.
Wow.
And there are actually a bunch of examples in the book, he talks about false confessions.
False confessions?
Where people under duress, sleep deprivation or, intense pressure, they can be convinced to confess to crimes that they didn't commit.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
People admit to things they didn't actually do.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
It is, and what's even more unsettling is that they often end up actually believing their false confessions.
Oh, no. They might invent memories to support those narratives.
So, if our own minds can be like manipulated like that, like what else were we capable of believing, right?
And that's exactly the point that Travers is driving home here. Our capacity for self-deception is really vast, and it extends way beyond just like our own individual lives.
Okay.
He argues that entire societies can fall prey to what he calls false historical narratives.
Okay, so we went from cuckoo birds to false confessions.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about like whole societies being built on lies.
It can happen.
Like how?
So think about it this way. Throughout history, I mean, there are countless examples of governments or institutions or even entire cultures kind of rewriting the past to fit a certain narrative.
Right.
Right, and often these narratives are used to justify things like wars or oppression or, the persecution of certain groups.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a larger, like more complex version of those false internal narratives.
Exactly.
It's like self-deception, but on like a societal scale.
Precisely. And these narratives, they often rely on the same sort of psychological mechanisms like denial and projection, and something called cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
I know, it sounds complicated. It's not as complex as it sounds, though. It's basically that uncomfortable feeling we get when our actions don't really line up with our beliefs.
Okay.
And so to kind of alleviate that discomfort, we sometimes end up, twisting the facts or our memories to make things feel more consistent in our minds.
So like if a country commits like an atrocity, it's easier to just like rewrite history and deny that it ever happened.
Yeah.
Than to like confront the truth and that like cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism. It's a way to kind of protect the collective ego of a nation or a group.
Wow.
And Travers argues that these false historical narratives, they can be incredibly dangerous because they prevent us from really learning from the past, and they can even perpetuate, cycles of violence and oppression.
This is heavy stuff. We're talking about deception on a level that I think most people probably don't even realize is happening. Like, it feels like we're living in a world where nothing is what it seems.
And that's exactly why he wrote the book. He wants us to be aware of these mechanisms of deception, both on a personal level and on this kind of societal level, because he argues that awareness is the first step towards combating the really negative consequences of deception.
Okay, so if we're naturally prone to both deceive and be deceived,
Yeah.
like, what can we do about it? Like, how do we break free from this cycle and start seeing things more clearly?
Well, he does offer some really valuable strategies for recognizing and combating deception.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready. So we've talked about how deception is everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're often terrible at seeing it.
Yeah.
How do we even start to combat something that's so deeply ingrained in us?
Well, Travers believes that awareness is key.
Okay.
We need to be aware of our own biases,
Yep,
our predispositions to self-deception,
Okay.
but also the ways that these larger narratives that we've been talking about, the ways they can shape our understanding of the world.
It's a lot easier said than done, though, right?
It is.
Like, how can we become more aware of something that by its very nature is meant to be hidden?
Right. Well, he suggests that we start by cultivating a healthy dose of skepticism, especially when we're encountering information that seems to confirm our existing beliefs. It's really easy to just kind of accept things at face value if they already align with what we think.
Right.
But that can make us really vulnerable to manipulation.
Yeah, it's like that saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also emphasizes how important it is to seek out diverse perspectives,
Okay.
even ones that might make us a little uncomfortable.
Right.
Because if we're only ever consuming information that reinforces what we already believe,
Yeah.
we're much more likely to miss the full picture.
We're just stuck in our own little echo chambers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to be willing to branch out and be open to hearing different points of view.
Yes.
That's tough, though.
It is. It's a challenge, but it's an important one.
Definitely.
He also encourages us to be critical of even our own memories and perceptions.
Oh, interesting.
And he even suggests, maybe keeping a journal
Okay.
as a way to sort of track our thoughts and feelings over time, which can really help us identify those patterns of self-deception or rationalization that we might not even notice otherwise.
So we're like holding up a mirror to our own minds.
Exactly.
And being like, all right, let's take a close look at what's really going on in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's for like our own personal lives. But what about on like a societal level?
Well, on a societal level, he says we need to be more willing to challenge authority, to question these larger narratives, especially the ones that seem to be justifying things like harmful actions or systems.
So if we come across like a historical narrative and we see that it's glorifying one group of people while it's demonizing another,
Right.
we should be like, hold on a second. Let me look for evidence that either supports this or maybe contradicts it.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
Because remember, getting to the truth often requires us to really dig beneath the surface
Yeah.
and be willing to ask some tough questions.
That's a lot of work.
It is.
But it feels really crucial, especially these days
Yes.
when, information spreads so quickly and it's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Right. And, it's not just about uncovering lies and deception.
All right.
It's really about cultivating a deeper understanding of the world around us and also ourselves.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So really, this whole deep dive into the folly of fools has been, it's not just been about kind of exposing all these like tricks that our minds can play on us.
Right.
It's like a call to action in a way.
Precisely. And Trivers really wants us to see that we're not helpless.
Got it.
We're not just pawns in this game of deception.
We have some agency.
Yes, we have the power and the responsibility to become more discerning,
Okay.
more truthful, and more aware.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can leave our listeners with just one like key takeaway from all of this, from Trivers' work.
What would it be?
Yeah.
I think it would be that, truth, even though it can be really elusive sometimes, it's still a worthy pursuit. And that by understanding these mechanics of deception, we can all take steps to live, more honestly and authentically.
That's really well said. I think that's a perfect place to leave it then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And a huge thank you to Robert Trivers for giving us so much to think about.
Absolutely.
For sure. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.